mysterious. Hey fam, thanks for coming back. How's everybody doing out there? I can tell you what, I've been busier than a breadcrumb on its way up an anthill. I have not had too much time to get these videos in, but here I am when it can be. I got a couple real fun ones here for you today. Before we get into that, smack that subscribe button for me. I appreciate that. And where are you watching from? Drop it down in the comments. I always love seeing where everybody's watching from. Let's get into today's first Bigfoot story. Our first one comes to us from Dennis, a resident of Wyoming. And here's his story. It was during the summer months of 1982, which my brother had called me after having found one of his cattle dead in the field. My brother had made somewhat of a killing in the initial personal PC craze with some innovative software designs and was already, in a way, retired. He certainly wasn't doing the 9-to-5 routine anymore. His property was more or less like a small farm, but he wasn't into making money on it or anything. He was more or less enjoying seeing and caring for the animals, being more or less like pets, with part of his farm being about 6 or 8 head of cattle. He hadn't gotten into any of the particulars on the phone, but when I arrived, I was now standing over the dead animal. Its rear leg had been torn off. It was a singular large bite taken from the upper portion of its back. Its neck was twisted precariously backwards. He said to me, "What do you think?" It was bizarre to say the least, with his property being fairly in the open, all things considered, and I wondered who or what had snuck up in here to do such a thing, being undetected. So I told him I thought he should call a veterinarian and let him have a look, which he did. I stayed at his house, and several hours later the vet came, being more than a little interested in what he had reported. As the three of us were now looking at the dead beast, she had said that it looked like some type of an animal attack, but had never seen anything quite like it. There were no claw marks or scratches. And that fact that the neck had been broken brought yet another strange twist to the table. No pun intended. He had called his neighbor who came over with a backhoe, and digging a ditch, the animal was buried. We were in absolute quandary over just what had occurred in regards to this animal. It was many months later, when winter had already had its grip on the state, when the phone rang once again. It was my brother. The date was December 17th. Answering the phone, my brother had stated that another one of his cattle was found dead in the field, and he wanted me to come over right away. He sounded a bit frantic. This was very unusual for him, in that he possessed an extremely scientific mind in which everything had an order and a purpose, and nothing was beyond his ability to figure out or ascertain if he put his mind to it. But this was different. When I got to the house, we immediately went out to the field where the dead animal was, and much to my surprise, the condition and positioning of this animal was almost identical to the one months before. If I didn't know any better, I would have said it was the same animal, which of course it wasn't. But today was different. We had about 10 inches of snow on the ground, in which there was a long line of gigantic footprints leading both to and away from the carcass, as well as those which were surrounding the dead animal. They were huge, measuring some 24 inches long and being extremely wide, with misshapen human-looking toes which turned inward. There was no sense in calling the vet back out. The two of us began to trace the steps back across the field, heading towards some timber about a quarter mile away. The tracks led to and over a fence, with no damage being done to the fence whatsoever, which, by the way, was 6 feet tall. Having negotiated the fence ourselves, we traveled onward about another 300 yards to a place where the tracks had just stopped. And it was in this very same place that we could see the tracks coming in had started. Now, in this spot of the field, where these tracks had both abruptly started and stopped, the snow was melted down to the very soil in what was clearly a circular pattern, with the circle being perfectly symmetrical and having a diameter of about 20 feet. The two of us walked for quite some distance in every direction, thinking that at some point we would pick up on some other clues, but nothing was found. The tracks were in a virtually perfect line, being placed 1 foot directly in front of the other, and had both begun and stopped at this melted circular clearing. We were dumbfounded. Both the topics of Bigfoot and aliens were discussed at length by my brother and I. But what to say or do about such an incredible thing was beyond our combined comprehension. In the months and years following, there were no further events on his land, in spite of the fact that he still had cattle and a host of other animals present on the farm. Well, dang. That's a pretty interesting one. Bigfoot or aliens, or both? Or maybe Bigfoot's flying around in a flying saucer? You tell me. Let's jump into our next one. This one comes to us from Steve. He's out of Maine. It was deer season in 1978 when my brother and I had ventured into the northern region of Caribou, Maine, near Eagle and Square Lakes. This was an area in which we'd hunted many times, and had scored fairly well through the years. Getting fairly near to the location with our truck, we still had a reasonably long hike into the area where we were to begin our stalk. It was several hours later when we had scored our first buck of the season. Having butchered and bagged it, we were making our way out of the forest. At some point, being overcome by the burden of carrying such a heavy load, I had stopped to put the pack down and placed my hand against a tree in a leaning posture. As soon as my hand hit the tree, I drew it back quickly. I felt something sticky and moist. As I pulled my hand away to look at it, with my palm now facing me, I knew immediately from years of hunting that my hand was smeared with viscous, sticky, old animal blood. My brother said to me, "Oh my God, what is that?" I said to him, "It was on the tree." At the same time, we both looked up. Draped over a limb about 20 feet off the ground was the complete body of a doe, and it was not old at all. We could see that it was fully intact, with the exception of being that both its front legs were snapped off. They were 2 stubs, which we could plainly see from our position. With that, my brother Barry gets a harebrained idea, which he's going to climb up and pull it down, which he proceeded to do. He now having blood from the tree all over his clothes and hands. He gave the doe a shove and she came tumbling down to the ground with a whack. Standing over it, she didn't appear to be a day old, and more than likely had been placed there this very day that we found her. Based on the lack of resistance as we grabbed the head, it appeared as though the neck had been broken. But by what? In all of our days of hunting, we had neither seen or heard of such a thing being found in Maine. We began to examine the tree's trunk, looking for any indications of something having climbed the tree, but there was nothing to be seen. No black bear would have left the carcass of an untouched doe, and I had never heard of a black bear treeing its catch. With both the legs being broken cleanly and the neck being broken, the rest of the hide was completely untouched. No claw marks, no blood stains. The carcass was in perfect condition. When we made it back to Presque Isle, we had stirred up no small commotion with our talking about our find. Having left the doe in the woods, it was then when one of our cronies had said, "Why didn't you bring it out so we could see it?" To which we said that we were already carrying 125 pounds of meat. They became so incensed about what we said that it was decided that we would go back and get the doe. The following day, having driven back up there and hiked back in where the doe had been, it was gone. With the discovering of the deer being gone, this kid Joey starts blowing off how we planned all this to freak everyone out. And I said, "Hey, wait a minute. You asked us to come back here. I didn't even want to go, nor did I ask you." With that, he and the others started to look around. When this guy Frank said, "Hey, check this out," he was pointing and staring at what was a large singular footprint in the soft peat. Then one of the boys had said it was a footprint of a hairy man. Well, as you would imagine, that about iced the proverbial cake for all of us. And being unarmed, we exited hastily, to say the least. I and the others were now believers in something that we had all heard about in the passing through the years and had never seen. With this newfound evidence of first the deer and now the footprint, we were convinced that there was something large and well able to kill wandering around up here. And it changed our lives and thoughts on a permanent basis. And that's all Steve has to say. Well, what do y'all think? That would freak me out. You lean up against a tree, you're out hunting, come away and look at your hand and it's covered in old sticky blood. That would be on the creepy side if you ask me. But anyway, appreciate y'all hanging out. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll do what I can to keep these videos coming as I have time. I got a whole pile of kids to take care of and a lot going on lately, so I do what I can. So appreciate y'all. I'll see y'all in the next one. Oh, and by the way, as y'all know, if you've been around here for a minute, if you've had an encounter with a Bigfoot, I'd love to hear about it, or anything mysterious for that matter. Drop me an email at cryptidmysterious@gmail.com, and I'll see y'all in the next one.